Hello once again everyone, my name is Levi. We are back in the Nerd Cave. It is day 26 of our 30-day video challenge where we bring you at least a 5-minute video every day for 30 days. We are approaching the end. We are in a new year. It is January 1st, 2020, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about open source software. What is it? Why does it matter? Should you care? What do you need to know? So here we go. I think if you're an average consumer user of technology, you've probably heard the phrase open source in the past, and maybe more frequently in the last couple of years. But it's not something that affects your daily life. You don't really think about it. What is it? Why do I care? And is there something there that I should be concerned about? Let's talk about first what open source is and is not. Open source software is typically used to refer to software in which the code that is used to create the software is available for anyone to download, look at, make modifications to. For example, if there was a program you really liked using, but it just had one little flaw in it. It had one, it would be great if there was an extra feature or a button here instead of over there. If it was open source software, you could go and download the code that was used to make that software, and you could make changes to the code of the software and then use the software in the future and distribute it to other people. The way something like Windows or Microsoft Office works, it is a closed source system. So if you don't like something about how Microsoft Word performs a certain task, you as an individual are not allowed to sort of take the lid off of Microsoft Word and root around and tune it up and do what you want with it. If you are using a tool like LibreOffice, which is open source, and there was a feature, a function, or something in LibreOffice that you really just couldn't live without and nobody else was building it for you, you could take the lid off of that, open up the computer code, root around in there, and make the feature you wanted. Let's talk about some open source software you have probably at least heard mentioned. The Linux operating system is open source. Anybody can grab the core Linux code, take it, get in there with the appropriate skills, and redo some things, improve some things, break some things, do whatever they want to it, and redistribute it. As opposed to Windows or Mac OS or iOS, which you are not legally allowed to make core changes to that and redistribute, because that is considered tampering with a product because it is closed source. You can think of this in a similar fashion to copyright. If Stephen King writes a novel and he had an open source license on that novel, you could download the whole novel, pick it apart, rearrange it, rename a character, make a slight adjustment to the plot point. You didn't want the hero to die in the end, so you rewrite it so that they live, and then you put the book back out there into the world. With an open source book, you can absolutely do that. There's a misconception that open source software is always free, or that free software is always open source. Neither of those things are true 100% of the time. Some open source software you will pay for. Elementary OS, which is a spectacular distribution of Linux, but you will pay some amount of money for it. And with that money comes support from the company that has rewritten Linux to their particular use case. Some free software is not open source, so you can download some Windows programs that maybe it's a screenshot tool or something else that aren't open source, but they're just giving it to you for free. But what that means is if it ever breaks and they decide not to fix it, you are not allowed to fix it because it's closed source. So open source and free do not always overlap, although they do quite a bit. Open source software is in almost everything you use. If you have an Android phone, the core operating system for Android, there is a version of that is open source. If you use Windows, you're gonna be using some open source components. Windows is about to incorporate the Linux kernel into its core Windows operating system. Mac OS has for a very long time had some underlying properties of Linux in it, so there's some open source code in Mac OS. So let's boil this down very simply. What does open source mean to you? Open source is the backbone upon which most of our modern computing technology is built. Who contributes to open source? Is it just a bunch of bearded guys in stained t-shirts sitting in a basement somewhere drinking Red Bull and just hacking away all night? There are some of those people. There are also people who work for IBM, who work for very large corporate entities that contribute to open source because those companies use open source to run their businesses as well. There is open source in almost anything that has a microchip in it. What does it mean for you as a consumer? It means that the technology that you get to use is going to become steadily more reliable because more people are looking at it. But on a practical basis, it can mean things like if you don't want to purchase Office 365 from Microsoft, you can Google up LibreOffice or free Office alternatives, and you will find 4 or 5 different versions of an Office suite that has a word processor, a spreadsheet, presentation software, most of which is compatible with Microsoft Documents already. If you have an older computer and you still want to use it because it's great, it's too slow to run Windows or it doesn't have enough memory to run Windows, you can go find a version of Linux that is free for you to use. You download it, you install it, all of a sudden your old computer is suddenly useful again. There are versions of the Chrome browser that is open source. It's called Chromium. There are bits of open source everywhere. The key things I want you to remember are open source and free do not always mean the same thing. Open source software exists in almost all of the technology you currently use, whether that's on the web, on your phone, on a laptop, on a desktop, everywhere, even in your car. This has been day 26. We are heading to day 30. I'm so glad you guys tuned in once again. Guys, it's been so much fun talking to you. I can't wait to do it again tomorrow. Take care, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye, everybody.